Hello, friend, and welcome to Daily Treasure, a devotional podcast by Sharon Betters, produced by Mark Inc. Ministries. This week, our guest writer is Colette Fabry, and I am your narrator, Jane Ann Wilson. Today's devotional is Lessons from the Grief of David, and today's treasure is David arose and fell on his face to the ground, and bowed himself 3 times, and they kissed one another and wept one with another. 1 Samuel 20, verse 41, KJV. David's grief journey is a testament of faith and resilience. In 1 Samuel, we witness a deeply emotional moment between David and Jonathan as they weep, realizing the threat posed by King Saul, Jonathan's father. Initially, David was favored by Saul, who treated him like a son. David married Saul's daughter, Michal, and he shared a strong friendship with Jonathan. David was fiercely loyal to Saul. Nonetheless, the king's jealousy grew hostile, and Saul violently attempted to end David's life. One such effort occurred while David was playing music for Saul. The king threw a spear at him, leaving David unharmed, but wounded emotionally. Confused and afraid, David rushed to Michal, who helped him escape through a window. David then went to the prophet Samuel, who had anointed him as the future king years ago, and they sought God. Then David met with Jonathan, and they devised a plan to gauge Saul's intentions. Jonathan defended David, and when Saul's rage escalated, he threw another spear, this time at Jonathan. Despite the grief and danger, David and Jonathan's loyalty was solidified. David went to the chief priest Ahimelech, who gave him showbread from the altar and the sword David had used to kill Goliath. In fear, David fled to Achish, a Philistine king, where his terror led him to feign madness. Eventually, David found refuge in a cave at Adullam. It was in this cave, later known as En-Gedi, that David wrote Psalm 34, illustrating his transformation from fear to faith. Despite his circumstances, he chose to worship and magnify God, declaring, "I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth." Psalm 34:1. Even while experiencing grief and uncertainty, David reminded himself of God's faithfulness. He declared God's promises as true, even though they didn't feel true for David. David entered the cave in despair, but emerged strengthened in faith, even while his external struggles continued for another decade. But David had changed. He learned to trust God's character and promises, remembering his identity in God. He said, "I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and he delivered me from all my fears." Psalm 34:4. God took away his fear. David's unshakable faith became sight. During his time in the cave, God sent 400 men to support David, who became their captain. Additionally, David's parents and brothers came to encourage him. Despite Saul's pursuit, God's favor rested on David. He met every need and provided protection. This period of grief, loss, and hardship transformed David, reshaping him for his future role as king. Every challenge allowed him to experience God's divine favor in new ways. David gained wisdom and strength. He learned that God's favor mattered far more than human approval, and that his presence would sustain him through the darkest times. David's story offers valuable lessons for anyone who is navigating grief. David sought God and wise counsel, taking time for stillness and meditation. Despite fear and confusion, he didn't allow his grief to make him bitter. God was present throughout David's grief, offering reminders of his covenant faithfulness. Abimelech's provision of the showbread and sword symbolizes God's enduring promises. David's grief ultimately deepened his relationship with God. He turned to God in his grief, and then God miraculously transformed his sorrow into purpose. God took away David's fear by revealing himself as a personal God who defends, protects, and provides. David's journey through grief reminds us that, like him, we can find hope and strength by seeking God in our sorrow. Father, please help those who are going through trials that don't make sense. Give them clarity at the perfect time, and most importantly, show them who you are and deepen their relationship with you. Amen.
Hey friends, thanks so much for joining us for the Daily Treasure podcast, and thank you for helping us spread the word by leaving a comment or a rating on your favorite podcast platform. You know that we like to help turn your hearts towards some of our other resources that are designed to turn your hearts toward Jesus. And today I want to showcase our Help and Hope podcast that we did with Brian Stout. It's called When Your Future Turns Upside Down. Brian and his wife say that the diagnosis of severe autism for their son Matthew confronted them with the reality that their future that they had planned would never come. In this conversation, Brian touches on how he and his wife went into survival mode, how he initially thought they could fix his son, the spiritual struggles they experienced, and the impact their son Matthew had on their other children and their marriage. Through their journey, they have met many, many challenges, and Brian offers help and hope to anyone experiencing upheaval through circumstances beyond their control. I know that this conversation, like all of the other Help and Hope conversations, is going to touch someone's heart who is in desperate need of hope. So make sure you check out this Help and Hope podcast called When Your Future Turns Upside Down, a conversation with Brian Stout, and share it with a friend. Spread the good news of the help and hope of Jesus. I'm Sharon Betters. Thanks so much for joining us for Daily Treasure, and we look forward to being with you tomorrow.